Hello geeks, welcome to our new channel. Finally, I'm doing videos for all the episodes in season 1, and this is going to be my Loki episode 1 video. Be sure to subscribe to get everything. We're doing a giveaway for Disney Plus memberships. For that, all you have to do is be a subscriber and let me know what your favorite Easter egg from the episode. Before we start, be careful for spoilers if you have not seen the episode yet. We'll be talking about everything, and I'll just start at the beginning of the episode and these as we go along and talk about Easter eggs and moments that they set up a lot and really big stuff. So let's get started. It's the first episode, so there's a lot of table setting and explaining what's going on. But starting at the beginning, the title of the episode is Glorious Purpose, a reference to his catchphrase from the first Avengers movie, which he repeats during the episode. He repeats a lot of his dialogue in his big speeches from the Avengers movies, but it's also a reference to Loki finding a new glorious purpose at the end of the episode, a new mission given to him by Mobius. New opportunity comes his way. By the way, Owen Wilson was fantastic during the episode as Mobius. I'll explain his character in a second too, but he also calls Loki on a lot of his bull crap like, what is your glorious purpose? What would happen if you became king of Midgard, king of Earth? Would you become king of space? Next, what would you do if you're a king of space? And it's like Loki doesn't have an answer for that, like he's not thought it through that much. The episode starts in the same Avengers Endgame, the time travel scene of 2012, redoing the elevator scene carting Loki off. They did change this a little bit, they added some footage, and they got rid of some stuff, just kind of speed things along. Like they zoom in on his face as he's waving goodbye to the Hulk. They make him take the stairs, but they speed run to the part where Loki gets his hands on the Tesseract, so they can just get to the moment where he portals away and winds up in the Gobi Desert. It is a very much like Iron Man 1 inspired scene. They have that funny moment with the locals where he sort of rushes to collect himself and stand on the rock like he's getting ready to perform for them. And he gives him the same Loki I am burdened with glorious purpose speech that he gave at the beginning of the first Avengers movie. They also give him his own custom version of the Marvel intro logo, just like they did on Wanda Vision and Falcon and Winter Soldier. It wasn't quite as crazy on Falcon and Winter Soldiers. The Loki version just changes the logo to Loki green, but just as the locals are giving him the business like, what are you? Who are you? What are you doing here? The Time Variance Authority hunters came, and the Minutemen portal in, so that's what they're calling these hunters. Here they're calling them the Minutemen. Most of the naming scheme of the TVA is based on puns for time travel. Then Hunter B-15 Wumi Masaku's character comes in. She's sort of one of the main characters in the series. Even though all these characters are part of the TVA, she's like one of the main hunters. She's kind of like Roz from Night Court, the bailiff, who will just wreck you if you look at them the wrong way, because the TVA is kind of like Night Court for MCU time travel villains. She starts talking about the rate of change in the timeline, the slope, the increase. So during the episode, when they talk about branch timelines hitting redline, what that means is that it approaches a certain limit when it eventually becomes a fully alternate reality, so they want to stop it from hitting redline and clip the branch, so to speak. Which is what those special devices are that they use here, so it basically resets this part of the timeline, this localized area, as if it never happened for these people. But you also get a good sense for some of their other core technology, like they have those stun batons, but they also have what they call the time twisters, which basically alter the flow of time for individual people, so Loki just winds up there feeling the sting as if it's like a continuous punch that just goes on for a minute. It's actually a little bit sinister. You can use that to torture someone. Something fierce in there are a lot of sinister overtones with the whole idea of the TVA and the timekeepers that I'll talk about as we go through the rest of the episode, very clearly foreshadowing them as some of the bigger antagonists in the series. There are obviously some big twists that they foreshadow during the episode too. Like the people you think are the villains probably aren't the real villains.
So, guys, are you a geek like me, and you like t-shirts and stuff of superheroes, and stuck for the best products and trustable sources to buy? Here are some product that you buy from Amazon. Go and check the link in the description. Now let's back to the video.
When he says he's had a very long day, he's referring to his failed invasion of Earth during the first Avengers movie with Thanos' Chitauri forces, and says that he's had his fill of idiots and armored suits, referencing the Avengers. Then, she muzzles him with that control collar, which is very similar to the control collar that Thor put on him to preventing him from using his powers and binding him to that special time twister. Then, they set the reset device and take Loki back to the Timekeeper's Citadel at the end of time. The technical term for it in the comics is the Citadel at the end of time because it was created literally at the end of the timeline, before the heat death of this version of the universe. But within the MCU, the way they talk about this place, this whole facility, it sort of exists in its own little pocket dimension outside the normal flow of space-time, so it's protected from things like Thanos snapping the Infinity Gauntlet, so none of these people in this place got snapped by Thanos, but you can see how some of these other moments early on, which are meant to answer some of the biggest questions like how come we've never heard about you? Till now. Loki even asked that question to Mobius. He says, well, because you've never had to. Which is kind of a meta answer too to the audience, was because we never really needed to tell a time travel story until after Avengers Endgame and this big multiverse overarching story of Marvel Phase 4 that we're in the middle of right now. But within the context of the story, the reason why nobody really talks about the TVA in the Avengers movies because they don't know about them is because they've been using the time reset devices every time something has happened, implying that there have been times when things have happened. But I love their design language for the TVA. It's got this very tactile 1970s sci-fi vibe to it, very British seeming too, like they're mixing a lot of classic sci-fi series like The Hitchhiker's Guide meets Doctor Who meets the Citadel of Ricks from Rick and Morty. And if you are a big Rick and Morty fan, the showrunner Michael Waldron actually came from Rick and Morty Season 3 to do this show, and he also wrote Doctor Strange 2: Multiverse of Madness. The Loki series is their first legit multiverse series in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, so it will have some crossover elements that help set up Doctor Strange 2 the same way that Wanda Vision did, and I will talk about the whole multiversal war that they reference, which is obviously a big secret. Wars lead up, they tease a ton of stuff, there is a lot of setup for many different things. So, don't be surprised if you re-watch the episode a couple times and you keep finding new things and new Easter eggs. But the whole idea of the Citadel of Ricks is on Rick and Morty is funny because it was actually based on Marvel's Council of Reeds. In the comics, they're a multiverse team of Reed Richards from alternate universes who team up to create a think tank, so Loki doing Rick and Morty is kind of like them, completing the circle of references, a Marvel project referencing something else than itself. But as she takes Loki into book, we see a variant scroll being booked. Then just another human douchebag red shirt that they're using for comedy during the episode as part of Loki's journey, who claims his father is super rich and on the board of Goldman Sachs. They also use this scene to demonstrate how the other time travel tech works, preventing Loki and the other prisoners from escaping. Like I said, just kind of meant to set up some of the jokes at the end of the episode when he starts using the technology against them. They also use this to set up the joke with a desk clerk about the Infinity Stones and the Tesseract later in the episode, with his desk drawer full of all kinds of versions of Infinity Stones from different universes. Like Infinity Stone, that sounds stupid. That's Marvel basically making fun of themselves too for using the Infinity Stones as such big plot devices for the entire 10-year run of the Infinity Saga movies. Bit of a meta reference for Marvel Phase 4. To kind of like saying that Infinity Stones will not be a thing during Marvel Phase 4. Then she introduces Loki to the processing queue. He goes on about how amazing his fine Asgardian leather costume is. Didn't know he was such a closed horse, it vaporizes it right off his body. You get that funny scene with him being naked. Then they have this very funny complicated system of floor drops where they drop him a couple levels through each different room, sticking him automatically in a prison jumpsuit as he has to verify every single word that he's ever uttered. You have that funny scene with a cat, which is probably not a cat. As a lot of you have probably guessed, a cat is never just a cat in the MCU. It's probably a Flarkin. Then they promptly dump him down another level and make him verify that he was born as an organic being, and he does have a soul. They use it for a couple of jokes too. Like Loki wonders for a second, wait a minute, what if I was a robot and I didn't know it? Or for just a hot second he does kind of wonder, wait a minute, am I really a person? But what they're referencing there, though, are beings like Vision and Ultron, living machines that technically don't have souls. Although if you are a big Star Trek The Next Generation fan, there was a very notable episode that dealt with this exact idea. The whole idea that they did not have a soul, and it was up to them to decide for himself whether or not he had a soul. They take that photograph of his temporal aura to set up for the later twists in the episode. They sort of use those to track the different variants, so like you leave your aura in things that you touch. When you travel around the multiverse, it's like a more complex version of a time travel fingerprint. As they travel into the queue, you see a bunch of posters we see Miss in Minutes. If her voice sounded familiar, that's because Tara Strong is the voice of Miss Minutes of the posters. All the flair all over the building in the different parts of the episode are all references to time travel, like this one reads behave, don't get your clock cleaned, and when they say clean they mean scrubbed as in deleted. Which we see happen within a couple minutes of this. They also play a lot of time travel jokes too, like Miss Minutes repeats the exact thing that Loki said. As if they knew that he was going to say it. But then as he's going through the queue, Miss Minutes basically gives him the tutorial on the TVA's history. And it says the TVA was created because of a vast multiversal war. That's a reference to Marvel's Secret Wars happening in the future of the MCU. I'll probably do a separate video about this because we've all been talking about Secret Wars. Even the Russo brothers have been talking about doing a version of Secret Wars in the Avengers movies, with all these alternate timelines and fully alternate realities, battling each other for supremacy like a bunch of variant universes battling each other until the Timekeepers emerged and created what they call the single sacred timeline for the entire multiverse. So the way they're canonizing time travel in the MCU timelines is that there's one timeline that encompasses the entire multiverse and all these alternate universes, and when a new branch timeline is created, they treat it like a fully alternate reality. And those happen through Nexus points, big major events that alter the flow of time. But during this part of the episode, and later several times in the episode, Loki has this big speech about the nature of free will, people not really having free will because the Timekeepers dictate everything that's supposed to happen in everyone's destinies. It's meant to give off a very sinister vibe. Because when Mobius is calling Loki out for his Avengers speech giving, all those people from the first Avengers movie about them craving to be subjugated free will. It's the same idea with the Timekeepers in the TVA, so I feel like that's a big foreshadowing moment that the Timekeepers themselves are going to wind up being bigger antagonists in the series than this other alternate Loki that they're trying to hunt down him. Also, if you notice during some of these animations, like when he's describing variants, you notice the background looks exactly like the landscape on Titan from Avengers Infinity War, but a lot of you will probably remember Wanda Vision.
Thanks for watching this long. Before we moving forward, here is one interesting question for you. Who is the most powerful villain in MCU as per comics, Thanos or Galactus? Drop your answers in comments. And let's move forward.
When they mentioned Nexus event, because Nexus was a big concept they introduced on Wanda Vision that was meant to be an Easter egg for Scarlet Witch as a Nexus being in the MCU. So Nexus beings are rare individual entities with the ability to affect probability in the future, thereby altering the flow of the universal time stream, or the sacred timeline as they call it on the Loki series. These beings, each referred to as a Nexus like Scarlet Witch, act as the keystones of the multiverse and are crucial to its ultimate coherence and stability, so these Nexus beings are vigilantly watched over by the cosmic forces, like the Time Variance Authority and the Timekeepers, to be aware of any temporal changes. So for instance, Loki is not a Nexus being, but because he had the Infinity Stone he was able to create a big enough change that he created these branch timelines. What they're saying is that Scarlet Witch is a Nexus being, doesn't need an Infinity Stone, she could change the future on this scale without that. That'll sort of play into the idea of Doctor Strange 2 Multiverse of Madness has connection point to that movie from the Loki series, but they also give you the TVA's official slogan for all time and is written by what they're calling the Narrative Commission. The funny meta reference here, the narrative being a reference to the story of the MCU. Like for instance, Kevin Feige is the head of the Narrative Commission of Marvel Studios because he says what the story is going to be. But then the melting this douchebag is just meant to be a callback to Thor Ragnarok and that funny moment where Thor freaked out watching the Grandmaster melt his underling after he himself going through a similar type of processing queue. Then they play the Loki title screen, and obviously the shifting style of the letters of his name are meant to be references to all the alternate versions of Loki that we'll see during the series. Then we get into the storyline with this alternate Loki that's going around killing TVA hunters in 1549's France. Mobius investigating the scene of one of these crimes. So my early theory here, just based on all the evidence they've provided and all the trailer footage that we've seen, is probably Lady Loki, the female version of Loki that they're hunting down. But the way they explain it, this other Loki had apparently set a trap for the TVA. They sort of pay this off at the end of the episode too. Like purposefully setting a trap for them so that she could steal this special time reset device. I believe this stained glass window behind Mobius as he's talking about the crime here is meant to be Joan of Arc, because we're in France in a church, and it's meant to foreshadow the Lady Loki twist being responsible for all this. Like they're using Joan of Arc's story as a metaphor for the story of Lady Loki. If you're not a big history fan of buff, Joan of Arc was burned at the stake for heresy against the church, and here they meant the TVA is kind of like a time church. So to speak, they call it the sacred timeline. They erase people, burn them. So to speak, it's kind of looks like they're being burned or vaporized here when they're deemed variants or heretics against a main timeline. So it's like Lady Loki on the Loki series is Joan of Arc, metaphorically, which also plays into the idea that she is not the real villain here. Even though they're kind of portraying her that way at the beginning of the series. Like I said, a lot of big twists that they're setting up here. The showrunner also clarified the stained glass window depiction of the devil here, and the director also backed this up that at no point did they ever discuss Mephisto on the series, so this depiction of the devil is not meant to be him. Although they do make a nightmare reference later in the episode to Nightmare, and Mephisto completely different character. We find out that this alternate Loki, possibly Lady Loki, who gave this little kid in the church the kablooey gum, the devil bearing gifts reference blueberry, but then just as they're about to reset this part of the timeline, another agent steps through and hands him the file on this version of Loki. Notice all the stuff on his file here too. It also correctly identifies his race as a frost giant, even though he was born a runt. His birthplace is Jotunheim, home of the frost giants. And notice the sector reads up to 2099. That's a reference to Marvel's 99 comic book story universe. Like Spider-Man 2099, who was played by Oscar Isaac in Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Oscar Isaac is also playing the live-action version of Moon Knight in the Moon Knight Disney Plus series. The whole thing with Loki's gender being fluid is just a reference to Lady Loki. Like I said, all this pointing to Lady Loki Easter eggs. We finally actually get to see her on screen, but I'm expecting it to be kind of an Agatha Harkness kind of reveal, where you don't fully learn what's really going on with her till later in the series. And before we wrap, let me know in the comments what was your favorite moment from the episode. And if there are any big Easter eggs that you spotted I didn't mention in the video. Just write them below in the comments. I'll do an episode 2 video next, and there will be a couple bonus videos. Also, I'll do a video about the big Secret Wars teaser that they're setting up in Doctor Strange 2 Multiverse of Madness connections, and also I'll name a giveaway winner when we complete 100 subscribers. Thank you so much for watching, and please stay safe, and I'll see you geeks in few days.